Last week, Israeli missiles struck the heart of Doha, killing 5 Hamas members and a Qatari security official. The attack came just as Hamas leaders gathered to discuss a US-brokered ceasefire proposal for Gaza. For the first time in decades, Israel had directly attacked a Gulf state, one of America's own allies. Today in Doha, leaders from 57 Islamic nations and 22 Arab states gathered for an emergency summit. They issued a strongly worded statement and promised action against Israel. But if history is any guide, their words will echo hollow across the region whilst Palestinian suffering continues. Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. For decades, the Muslim world has perfected the art of condemnation without consequence. Organization of Islamic Cooperation, that's the OIC, has issued countless resolutions about Palestine. The Arab League has held urgent meetings after urgent meetings. Yet, illegal Israeli settlements continue to expand, and Palestinian children still die under bombardment. When Israel killed over 15,000 children in Gaza, Arab leaders called for peace. When Israeli forces stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites, they issued statements. When Gaza faced starvation, they sent humanitarian aid whilst maintaining business as usual with Israel's backers. The Muslim world's greatest weakness isn't military inferiority, it's internal division. Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shia Iran remain locked in proxy wars across the region, using Palestine as a symbolic trophy rather than a genuine cause for unity. Whilst these regional giants compete for influence, Israel grows stronger. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim attended today's summit, but their presence cannot bridge the fundamental sectarian divide that has paralyzed Muslim solidarity for generations.
Yeah, I think the main reason for this, because most of the decision has been taken by the OIC over the years, it's a non-binding for the member group. So, but therefore, there is no show of any strength among the members against any countries that facing threats and brutal attacks. So, therefore, I don't see much of a changes on Qatar issue here, because we could see from most of the statements have taken from the Arab capital. Most of them were condemning definitely the attack on Qatar, and this is unprecedented attack, especially the GCC countries, where they're having a collective joint defense cooperation, and this has failed. And the United States also have failed Qatar, which have paid more than $1.2 trillion to Mr. Trump when he visited Qatar. And also they are paying more than $10 billion to the American military base in Adidid. So I think the problem lying here is that most of the countries will show only some sort of solidarity with Qatar. And if you notice the condemnation and the statement, they never talk about Hamas leaders who have been killed. They were only mentioning Qatar.
Iran's security chief Ali Larijani issued a warning this weekend, calling for Islamic governments to form a joint operations room against Israeli aggression. But such calls have been made for decades. The question remains, why hasn't it happened? Numbers tell a staggering story. Muslim-majority nations collectively spend hundreds of billions on defense annually, more than many Western powers combined. Turkey has NATO's second-largest army. Pakistan possesses nuclear weapons. Saudi Arabia boasts cutting-edge military technology. Yet this formidable force remains fragmented, fighting internal conflicts, whilst Israel maintains military superiority through US support. Even during Gaza's darkest moments, no coordinated military response emerged to protect Palestinian civilians. The potential exists for a deterrent force that could reshape West Asian security. Instead, Muslim armies patrol their own borders whilst Palestinian territories shrink daily. Perhaps nowhere is the Muslim world's failure more glaring than in economics. Gulf states control nearly a third of global oil reserves. The Strait of Hormuz and Suez Canal, controlled by Muslim nations, are vital checkpoints for world trade. 2 billion Muslims represent massive consumer markets across continents. Yet, this economic power remains largely untapped for Palestinian justice. During the 1973 Yom Kippur War, Arab oil producers imposed an embargo that brought Western economies to their knees. Today, those same producers prioritize trade deals with Israel's allies over Palestinian lives. Qatar's sovereign wealth funds invest billions globally. The UAE's economic partnerships span continents. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 seeks international integration, all whilst Gaza faces economic strangulation and the West Bank suffers land confiscation. Israel has mastered global narrative control through sophisticated lobbying, media influence, and diplomatic networks. Its representatives appear on every major news platform, shaping international opinion with professional precision. The Muslim world, despite its vast intellectual resources and global diaspora, has failed to build comparable soft power infrastructure. Israeli spokespersons dominate airwaves whilst Palestinian voices struggle for basic recognition. This isn't accidental. It reflects decades of underinvestment in cultural diplomacy and strategic communication. University campuses worldwide host pro-Israel advocacy groups with substantial funding. Meanwhile, Muslim nations have allowed Israel to control the narrative about occupation, resistance, and justice.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is, as I have been saying it for years, it is a perpetual provocation for permanent wars. And what Mr. Netanyahu has been doing over the years, we have noticed he has attacked 7 Arab countries, including even the flotilla, the ships which is going to Gaza to break the siege of the American there, and they have been attacking all over the countries, and nobody is stopping them. So I think this is a turning point for so many reasons. I think one of them is Abraham Accord will be shelved, where most of the Arab countries definitely will not go for any kind of normalization with Israel, especially the Gulf country. There will be a new alignment in the region. We may see now Saudi Arabia is reapproaching toward Egypt, because we could see Turkey coming closer to Qatar, which have been supporting. So I think Israeli and the United States have been totally isolated in this attack. And I'm sure United States under President Trump, realizing and recognizing the danger of giving the green carte blanche, total support blindly to Netanyahu, is turning America into a joke in the international community. America lost its face, lost its credibility and its accountability that can have a partner or it can have an ally. Both America will not be able to provide to any country. And I think Qatar is the example where most of the nation now thinking twice before joining hands with the United States.
The UAE's enthusiastic embrace of normalization with Israel exemplifies the problem. Despite ongoing settlement expansion and Palestinian dispossession, Emirati leaders celebrate their partnership with Tel Aviv as a strategic masterstroke against Iranian influence. Morocco followed suit, trading Palestinian solidarity for US recognition of its Western Sahara claims. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman speaks of eventual normalization once Palestinian statehood is achieved, a condition Israel has no intention of fulfilling. These nations justify abandonment of Palestine through geopolitical calculations. They've discovered that aligning with Israel brings Western approval and protection from criticism of domestic human rights records. Across the Muslim world, ordinary citizens burn with solidarity for Palestine. From Jakarta to Istanbul, millions march for Gaza. Online activism flourishes despite government surveillance. Yet, their voices remain powerless against authoritarian regimes that suppress dissent in the name of stability. Egyptian protesters face arrest. Saudi imams preach that Palestine belongs to Jews as well as Muslims. Emirati youth openly admire Tel Aviv's nightlife whilst Gaza burns. The gap between popular sentiment and official policy has never been wider. Arab Spring uprisings were crushed partly because governments feared Palestinian solidarity might inspire domestic revolution. Israel's attack on Qatar presents a unique opportunity. Unlike previous Israeli actions against Syria or Lebanon, this struck a wealthy, influential US ally with significant international leverage. Qatar hosts America's largest West Asian military base. Its media empire includes Al Jazeera, one of the world's most watched networks. Its sovereign wealth funds hold stakes in major Western corporations. Its diplomatic influence extends from Taliban negotiations to World Cup hosting.
وبالتالي فإن هذا العدوان لن يؤدي إلا إلى إجهاض محاولات التهدئة، ويؤكد نوايا الحكومة الإسرائيلية برفض المسارات السلمية لإنهاء القضية الفلسطينية والاستمرار في تحدي الإرادة الدولية وميثاق الأمم المتحدة، وهو ما يتضح من تصريحات المسؤولين الإسرائيليين المتكررة بشأن ضم الأراضي الفلسطينية وأوهام إسرائيل الكبرى.
If any nation possesses the tools to impose consequences for Israeli aggression, it's Qatar. The question is whether Doha will use this leverage or follow the familiar pattern of strongly worded statements followed by business as usual. The response from Washington was also telling. Instead of rushing to condemn the attack on Qatar, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio flew straight to Israel to meet Benjamin Netanyahu. The message was clear. Even when Israel strikes an American ally, US support remains unwavering.
We are focused on what happens now, what happens next, what role can Qatar play possibly in reaching an outcome here that leads not just to the end of this hostilities, not just to the release of all of the hostages, both living and deceased, not just the disarmament and elimination of Hamas, but also a better future for the people of Gaza, which isn't possible as long as Hamas exists, which isn't possible as long as 48 hostages are being held. And so we're going to continue to encourage Qatar to play a constructive role in that regard. As far as the President's been clear on the ongoing issues in Gaza, and that is that every single hostage, both living and deceased, needs to be home immediately. Hamas can no longer continue to exist as an armed element that threatens the peace and security, not just of Israel, but of the world, and that the people of Gaza deserve a better future, one that cannot begin until Hamas is eliminated and until all of the hostages, both living and deceased, are home.
History will judge harshly those who possessed power to act but chose comfort instead. South Africa's apartheid regime fell when international pressure became unbearable. Bangladesh's recent uprising showed how sustained popular pressure can topple seemingly unshakable governments. The Muslim world possesses every tool necessary for effective action: economic leverage through energy and trade, demographic weight through 2 billion citizens, strategic control of vital shipping routes, and moral authority as victims of historical injustice. What it lacks is unified will and courageous leadership willing to sacrifice short-term interests for long-term justice. Palestinian mothers in Gaza won't bury fewer children because of Monday's resolutions. Israeli settlers won't abandon West Bank outposts due to Islamic summit declarations. The siege of Gaza won't lift because 79 nations condemned it in 5-star conference rooms. Real change requires real sacrifice. It demands economic pressure that hurts bottom lines, diplomatic isolation that costs relationships, and strategic coordination that requires surrendering national ego for collective action. Israel's attack on Qatar has created a rare moment of clarity. The Muslim world can no longer pretend that measured responses and diplomatic protests will protect Palestinian lives or preserve regional security. Either the Islamic summit marks a turning point towards meaningful action, or it becomes another monument to the gap between rhetoric and reality that has characterized Muslim responses to Palestinian sufferings for generations. The weapons exist, the leverage exists, the moral imperative exists. What remains unclear is whether the political will exists to wield them effectively.
لقد تعرضت عاصمة بلد الدوحة التي تنعقد فيها هذه القمة إلى اعتداء غادر استهدف خلاله أحد المساكن التي تقوم فيها عائلات القيادة السياسية لحركة حماس ووفدها المفاوض، وهذا في حي سكني يضم مدارس وبعثات دبلوماسية.
2 million Gazans await the answer. 2 billion Muslims hold the power to provide it. History watches to see which force will prove stronger, the comfort of inaction or the courage of justice. The summit's true test won't be the words spoken in Doha's conference halls, but the actions taken in the weeks that follow. Palestine has waited 76 years for liberation. The question is whether its supposed defenders will finally match their deeds to their declarations. Thank you for watching Statecraft.